Hello, this is Lady B, and today I am making fingerless gloves, like this one. And I'm going to show you a really easy way to make one of these, how to make a pattern, and then how to use that pattern to make your own. Now, the easy method is you start with a mitten. This is just a isotoner. It's a thin fabric with a felt inside, single piece of fabric. You can pick these up in supermarkets, anywhere that carries basic clothing lines, just the generic stuff. Find something you like. I like black, obviously. And you look for something. You find one, it doesn't matter what the length is, you look for one that is snug around here on this part of where the knuckles are. For me, that meant a size large. For my son, it meant a size medium. We actually use these at night when it's cold to help keep our hands warm when we're sleeping, which is what we bought them for. So, this is easy to turn into a fingerless glove. Now, it comes with an elastic. This is so dark with it being black. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but you can see some zigzag stitching there real close, right there. And these mittens will come with an elastic in them. And all you have to do is unpick them. As you can see, there's a few threads. My son did this for me. My eyes aren't what they used to be. So you unpick them, take the elastic out, and now you have the mittens. So once you've removed the elastic, you cut across the top here. Now this is a knit material, and that's important because it will not unravel as easily. Now knit will run, so you have to put a finished edge on it, but it won't unravel like a straight weave would. And most of these that you buy, most mittens will be a knit if they're this single layer fabric. So we take some scissors, and found my orange scissors, and I'm going to cut across the edge where that curve is. Just take that curve right off the top. And because I use these for sleeping, I like them to be a little taller perhaps than others would. And I'm going to do the same for the thumb. Just take the very end off. So now you can see I put it on. And this goes almost to my knuckles here and goes to here. Now the next step for this is I am going to turn it inside out. I'm going to go onto a sewing machine, and I'm just going to cuff that in and sew with some black thread on my sewing machine, and just sew it over and make a seam here that matches the seam here. And that's it. I now have very easy to make fingerless gloves. And like I said, I made these extra high. They're all the way up to my knuckles because I use these when I sleep. I use them when I sleep to keep my hands warm. So if you don't want them this high, you can always do it a little lower, either on the thumb or here. If you like the style, you can even take the thumb all the way out. It's up to you. However you like it. But what if you don't find mittens you like, or you want something for summer that's a lightweight, or just in a color that doesn't come in the store for a mitten? Well, go out, buy mittens that fit you, fits the same, and make your own pattern. And you do that by taking it home, cutting the top and the thumb off, And then you go in with your scissors and you're going to cut off the seam. As you can see here, I have it inside out. There's a seam. It's really hard to see on the black. I apologize. But there's these seams, and we're going to cut these seams off. Number 4. All right. So I have, now your mittens may have less pieces, but unless you get gloves instead, you're not likely to have more. So you're probably at most going to have 4 pieces to work with. The next step is to make your own pattern. This is just printer paper, nothing special. But what we're going to do is we're going to lay the pieces out on the paper and we're going to trace them. So this is my first piece. Now this has gotten, because I have worn this for a while, it's gotten warped. So I am going to need to take a ruler for these edges that should be straight and aren't, and I'm going to straighten them. And you leave space around it. Now, I have 2 more pieces. I'll have to put on another piece of paper. But this is my pattern. Now, normally, the next step for this would be to draw in a seam allowance, because we just cut the seams off. We cut this off. These seams. And we need to put those back in for sewing purposes, which, depending on how you plan on sewing it, could be up to 5/8 of an inch. For something like this, at most you really want to do 1/4 of an inch. And so you would take your ruler and you would go around and you would add 1/4 of an inch seam allowance around the entire outside. Now, I'm actually going to use this pattern to make some gloves for a friend of mine who has smaller hands than I do. And 1/4 of an inch on each side for each of the seams is about the difference of that size difference between the large and the small. And so I'm actually going to treat my large without the seams as her small with the seams. So I'm going to write small on here so I know what size it is. And this will be my small. I've cut out the base that, like I said, this is going to be a small, but you're going to want to do the size of the glove that you bought. So I'm going to trace these and show you how that will work. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check and make sure I have all these on the correct side. So, because I'm not sure I do. I'm also going to mark the top. Okay, so I have here the pattern with the seam allowance. And you can see how on these places where it comes to a point, I have measured 1/4 inch also from the point to that and created a straight line there. That will let me do that. Now the next thing we need, and I've marked where up is on each of these, and I've made sure they were all facing the same way. So the next step is to mark where these attach to each other. So to do that, I'm going to take my pieces that I cut out and traced, and I am going to use the glove I didn't cut up to figure out how these go together. So if I put it together the way it goes together, those connect there. This is my thumb piece, goes like that, and that's how it all fits together. So now I need to mark these connecting points on my pattern. So there's my pattern. So now I need to cut it out of my fabric. And this is the fabric I've picked. It is a fleece, which I'm using a fleece because, and this is a knit fleece, but I'm using a fleece because this is a gift for a friend of mine who gets very cold in the winter. So this will be to keep her warm. I of course need 2 gloves, so I will need 2 of each piece. So I am going to fold my fleece. I'm going to lay it down on my table here. Lay it out. And the reason for these arrows is I need to make sure that the grain goes the same way on all of them. Now, it may not be important with this fabric, I don't know, but with some fabrics it very much matters. And so you draw an arrow directly to the top on your patterns so that you can use that to make sure that they all follow the same grain. Because yes, fabric has grain. So there's my layout. Let's see if you can see that a little better. There we go. And I'm just doing this on the very end. Now, if I don't want to, that is not going to take up very much of my fabric. So you know what? I am going to refold this so that I'm only folding over the amount I need. And this edge is much straighter than this edge, so I will match that up. There we go. That is all I need. So I'll just cut this part off. And get it out of my way. And this extra fabric, once again, will go into my stash for crafting and sewing. I have enough here, it looks like, for 1, maybe 2 more gloves if I decide to make some more. So maybe somebody else will get some orange winter gloves. And you think, why would you give them winter gloves without fingers? Well, in this case, the person I'm making this for is an artist, so she needs her fingers free for her work. And she's not the only artist I know. So I'm going to pin this down now. All right. There we go, pinned. So now I just have to cut. So there was our pieces, and normally now we would just put things together and sew it, but because of the fabric I used, this fabric is the same on both sides. So it's going to be a little more difficult to tell which piece is for which glove if I'm not careful right now. So right now I'm going to take the bottom of each one and separate it and put them in a separate stack so that I don't accidentally mix up what piece goes for what glove. There we go. So this is for one glove, and these are for another. And now it's time to sew. I've set up my sewing machine. I've had to switch which machine I am using. This is my Euro Pro denim machine because of how thick the fabric is when it's together. So now my 1/4 inch I'm double checking this, but 1/4 inch is just inside my machine, my foot. So my first one starts. Oh, I wanted to show you. I've said this before. Always pre-test your length of your stitch and your pressure. And I've done this. I did this in a black so I could see it better. Last time I showed you this, it was the same color. It was a red on red and you couldn't really see it. So this time I did it in black so you can actually see my test. And I tested twice, and I'm going with this top one because I think the stitches are a little better and more even. I have sewn this long end of this small one here, stopping 1/4 inch from the end to the top of this piece right here. And I'm now pinning this curved piece to it, and you can see how it is following this curve. Now again, I am not going to be sewing all the way to the end here. I'm going to be stopping 1/4 inch here. So I'll be stopping right there. There we go. So my next step here is to sew this bit here. Now, this little bit here, that matches there, and then this bit here goes to that corner there. So, pressing my seam this way to make it easier, it does this corner thing. It's kind of an odd little angle, but I'm going to guess they did this because otherwise all 4 of them would have met in this corner instead of 3. By moving this over, you'll have a seam here, and then we just sew here and here, and we're done. So the next thing to do is this, and that's from here to there. All right, so now we have our thumb. There's the palm, there's the piece that goes down the side, there's our thumb piece. Now the only thing left to do is to sew the back of the hand on. Oh, before I do that though, I want to reinforce the seams I just did. It's not strictly necessary. It's just something I like to do to make it more secure. So I have this on the back, and I'm just going to sew on either side. Now you'll remember I said I was pretty sure I had this too long. You'll see that that overlaps on both sides. I'm going to have to trim that and adjust my pattern. And that's the first one sewn. Now I'm just going to trim this edges here, and I'm going to trim this so that that matches. curve it slightly if I need to. Now, if I was going to, because of the fabric I'm using, I'm not going to be edging it. Because with this fabric, I don't need to. So it will look like this. And this won't fit on my hand, so I can't model it for you, but maybe I'll get my niece to model it for you. But there is one glove. Now I just need to do the same thing for the other. And we're done. Yay! It was a bit of a pain. What my sewing machine kept getting stuck. I really need to take it in for maintenance. But it's done. So for those of you who do want to try and make your own pattern, I'm going to review really quick how it worked. So you take a mitten that fits you, and you cut the top off and you cut the thumb off, like this one. And then you cut the seams out, and that gives you these pieces. And you trace the pieces onto paper to make your pattern. And in the video earlier, as I traced these, I numbered them to show where they connected. But as I sewed, I renumbered them to indicate what order they should be sewn in. I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Do not forget your seam allowance. It's very important. And I have these numbers. Now, if you are making a glove that, like this one, needs to have the thumb sewn down, earlier I was able to stretch it and do it, but these are very large gloves. There's a lot of give. If you're doing something that is more form-fitted, you're not going to have room for that. So the very first thing you do before you do anything else is you take your thumb pieces, and on this one it's this here and this here, and you iron that fold over on your seam allowance and just do a straight stitch to hold it in place. And that's the very first thing you're going to do, because you won't be able to do it later. And then you follow the numbers as I have marked here. The first thing in this case that you do is this 1 to 2 and 1 to 2 is you sew that to that. This then makes this curve here, which matches this curve here. And that step, the next step, was to sew this to this. And once that's done, then, and you'll notice I have my next numbers here, I have this dotted line here to here and this dotted line here to here. Now the reason for this arrow, this is the next thing you sew, but because this has been sewn into this, this doesn't go all the way to the end. You'll notice there is a, let's see if I can get that where you can see it better. This seam ends here, and then this seam connects here, and there's this space in between. And so when you take this piece and you move it over to here, part of this will also get sewn in here. And you'll be able to see where it goes. It won't be an issue. With this one anyway. It may be different for your mitten. But you sew that line here to here and here. And once you've done that, you will have this. Your thumb area And all you have left is these 2 straight seams on either side and this piece across the back. Now, the glove I used, the mitten I used to make my pattern, I had been using for a while and the back had stretched out a little bit. And I ended up, my piece here is a little longer than it should be. But you can take away, but it's really hard to add to. So I overemphasized just to make sure, and I can adjust my pattern now if I want, or I can deal with it later. But sewed it and trimmed it to match. Now, again, if you're going to do finished edges, once you've sewn that on, the last step is to fold these under, iron them in place, and just do a straight stitch across the top to finish that off. Let's see if I can get that to work. There you go. And to give you your finished edge. That's it. Top and bottom, and you're done. Now, I didn't think I would be able to fit these because I did size them down for my friend, but it turns out I can. So I'm going to show you what they ended up looking like. There we go. Some fingerless winter gloves in a beautiful Halloween orange. They are so warm. I really hope these work for her. Hope I got the size right. It's kind of hard to do, to check that when it's someone in another country. But I hope they'll work for her and they'll keep her hands warm. And I hope this pattern technique works for you. So whether you use the easy method or you break down the mitten to make your own pattern and make your own fingerless gloves out of whatever it is you want. It could be lace, cotton, any fabric. Once you have your pattern, you can use it for anything you want. Whether you go easy or you make your own, I hope this works for you. Until next time, this is Lady B with how to make your own fingerless gloves. Until next time, I think I said that already. So, we'll see you then. Bye-bye. Where did I get it? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, that's a mess. We'll figure it out. That's why I said sew this first. Did you just bump off again? Restring that again. Oh, it's because it's stuck down here. And I hope you had a laugh watching this. I certainly needed to laugh.